route to Whistler runs north from Vancouver, about 60 miles as the helicopter flies. About halfway, it enters the Cheakamus Valley, which for centuries was the private hunting domain of the Salish Indians. By 1858, the white man had made his debut in the valley, looking for an alternate route to the Caribou Goldfield. The first permanent settlers nestled in here at the turn of the century. Even though today Whistler has become one of the hottest ski resort developments in the world, the spirits of these early pioneers live on. Florence Petersen has been the catalyst behind the Whistler Museum and Archives.
It's here partly because I promised these old people they wouldn't be forgotten. There were a couple of old trappers and other residents who felt, and Myrtle too, that maybe they'd all be forgotten with the modern ski jet feeling and flash.
During the show, as we look at these two world-class ski resorts, Whistler on the right, Blackcomb on the left, we'll also meet some of the pioneers, friends of Florence Petersen.
As Laurie mentioned earlier in the program, Whistler Blackcomb has been ranked as the #2 area in North America by a very popular American ski magazine. It finished just behind Vail, Colorado. But in actual fact, in a number of areas, in particular dining, Whistler Blackcomb Resort came out on top. We couldn't resist the temptation. We visited 3 of the very best restaurants in this ski resort.
On their first night in Whistler, Todd and Laurie were the guests of the Aurora Japanese Restaurants, a new addition to the Nancy Greene Lodge.
He works fast, doesn't he? You know what I don't like about sushi? You can't bite it. You have to put the whole thing in.
He's fast, eh? Quick hand.
He is.
Todd felt a little compassion for our cameraman, having to work while they were eating.
Rob, your BC rolls are here.
How are they?
Oh boy, are they ever good. You'd love them.
I would.
The Japanese trade has picked up probably about 200% in the last year. We went from about 7% to this year about 30%.
If there's one individual who personified Whistler in all aspects, past and present, it has to have been Myrtle Phillip. She lived in Whistler for over 75 years. Florence Petersen was at one time a neighbor of hers.
She was a fantastic woman. She really was. She was everything here, from postmistress to midwife to fundraiser, as many others were, and they built the first school, and for nearly 40 years she was our only school trustee.
Myrtle Phillip was 20 years old when she and her husband Alex first visited the area on vacation in 1911.
They took the Union steamship to Squamish in 1911 and came up for a 2-week holiday. They walked from Squamish, took them 2 days, stayed with the little trapper down by our museum now at Function Junction, and they found 10 acres that they bought and began to build their resort.
Today you can travel from Vancouver to Whistler in about a half an hour.
It's called the Whistler Heli Express. It's a new service we just started in December. It's basically a new product, our first time for our company to get into scheduled service, so we've got a lot of high hopes for it, and we're hoping it's going to do really well. The cost is $125 one way or $225 return. It's basically came about from a lot of the local people that are in Vancouver here. A lot of the people that work for Canadian Helicopters have got places up in Whistler, and they've completely disgusted with the drive up there.
Myrtle Phillip on the rights with her friend Molly Hunt. During the first half of the century, skiing in the Whistler area was considered a minor winter diversion.
I'm riding up the Whistler Express with Mary Reed, who's a ski friend here and has been skiing at Whistler since the mountain opened. What kind of changes have you seen happening here?
One of the main changes is the road to Whistler. Some people who come up now say, my, that is a road you really have to concentrate. But we used to live in Point Grey in Vancouver, and it used to take us 3.5 hours to get here, on a dirt road at the beginning. And we used to have sometimes to put chains on for the last 30 miles. It's very much improved. The only thing that's bad about the road these days is the drivers.
What have you noticed about the type of people that come to Whistler?
We are very definitely now a destination resort. I've met people from Nome, Alaska. I met a man who took the Pepsi Learn to Ski program who was from Zimbabwe, and on his third day he was skiing down Upper Whiskey Jack. Almost, not as fast, quite as fast as I, but he was halfway down the hill when I got to the bottom. And we have many Asian visitors. We have people from Hong Kong, many people from Japan. I've learned how to say good morning in Japanese, and sometimes they just look at me and can't believe that I'm speaking Japanese, and I'm not sure that I am sometimes, but when I say it the second time, they understand.
Which is, what is good morning in Japanese?
Good morning in Japanese is Ohayo gozaimasu.
What else?
With a nod, with a nod.
And a big smile.
Yes, always for visitors. It's so nice to have them.
Myrtle and Alex Phillip built the Rainbow Lodge in 1913 and ran it for 35 years. At its peak, it could accommodate 100 people and was the most popular resort west of Banff and Jasper. The Whistler Museum has recreated a room for Myrtle Phillip's Rainbow Lodge. The furniture in the room was brought from the original cabin. The shelves, tables, and chairs were all handmade for Myrtle right here at Whistler.
The ultimate room that's available for rent here at the Chateau is called the Whistler Suite. It rents for $800 a night. And while that may be a little bit rich for most of us, they don't have any trouble keeping it fully occupied throughout the entire ski season. The quilt and the artworks here have been specially commissioned for the hotel. And the furniture in this room is so comfortable and elegant. It's a beautiful combination of the Southwest look, the Arizona style, as well as Canadian art. And outside the patio doors, well, you have the most spectacular view of the resort itself. On the left is Blackcomb Mountain. You see the lower runs, all the new condominiums that have been built in the bench lands in between the two mountains. The black chair and the runs coming down into town on Whistler Mountain, and down below, well, some people enjoying some fun in the afternoon after skiing.
And now it's time for the McDonald's Portrait. In this week's edition, we'll meet 3 Canadian World Cup racers from past and present, all who now live in Whistler.
Does everybody know who this is with me here? No? This is my friend Laurie Graham. Hey? I've got a whole table from Toronto over here.
Oh, yeah.
When most Canadians think of Nancy Greene, they remember 1968, the Winter Olympics in Grenoble, France. A gold and a silver medal later, Nancy arrived back in Canada amidst a massive celebration, the likes of which Canadians from coast to coast had never seen before. From that moment on, Nancy Greene was a Canadian sporting legend.
I'm happy that my career took place in the transition stages. It was really fun being part of those early World Cups. There was a sense of excitement that maybe gets a little bit organized out of it. And even before the Olympics, I remember going to races as part of the Canadian team where we were literally hitchhiking from one race to another, and we were, you know, sort of saving our tea bags from meal to make ends meet. There wasn't much fundraising, and we were the Canadian team, but it wasn't a big organized program.
Her success sparked the advent of commercial sponsorship, which changed the nature of competitive sports in Canada forever. Now, instead of worrying about funding, athletes could concentrate on competing, and corporate sponsors had a new vehicle to advertise their product.
It means a lot to us on the national ski team what the Mars bars are doing for us. This promotion is the first of its kind anywhere in Canada, to have a commercial tie-in with a product and to have a direct financial source from the product.
Send your Mars bar wrappers to Mars Ski Fund, care of Nancy Greene, Post Office Box 2100, Toronto, Ontario.
From her home in Whistler, Nancy and her husband Al Rain still keep a close eye on the world of skiing, and especially on the fortunes of Canadian skiers on the World Cup circuit.
It's always been fun for me to follow the Canadian team and sort of be a fan and root for them. And right now I think we have a crop of very fine skiers. Rob Boyd, of course, is from Whistler, and we know him well, and it was great to see his victory on Whistler last year. And I think he's got the talent, and he's kind of spearheading a new wave of downhillers.
Everything looks good. There's two things, though. The lamps, they're good and sturdy, because we don't want them to be able to tip over.
Right now, what am I doing? Well, I'm still very much involved with our hotel here at Whistler. Al and I sold the hotel a year ago, a little over a year ago.
You probably don't know this, but when we were struggling away trying to get the hotel started and everything else, we needed to raise some money. And Laurie was winning races then, and she was a partner of us in the hotel. So, Laurie, it's great to have you back for a few days. How long are you staying?
Oh, just a couple of days. Just doing a show on Whistler, showing the hotel and the area and the skiing and the people. So, hope you're all having fun here.
But I have a long-term contract with the new owners, and it's great. I do exactly what I did before. The only difference is I get paid. And really my role with the hotel is to be around in the wintertime and ski with the guests and meet them, and in the off-season to do marketing and promotion. And I enjoy it. You know, it gives me a really good excuse to get out and promote Whistler. And in the wintertime, my job is probably the most perfect job in the world.
But the Crazy Canuck thing was more it was kind of funny at the time. We used to say, well, those guys, those Europeans, just can't believe that we're actually beating them, so they've got to call us crazy. They won't admit we're skiing faster than them, so we must be nuts. But they also had a little racer culture that was sort of almost like a little bit of a racer union, where if they didn't like the weather or something like that, they'd all clique up and say, well, we're not going to run today. But we weren't part of that scene, so we'd get out into the gate and run it. And I think maybe that's where a little bit of it came from. If it was foggy or whatever, it wasn't dangerous, and the other guys all ended up running anyway, but we were the ones to run in there and say, well, we'll go, so let's get this thing rolling. They didn't like that very much. I've been here working at Whistler for the past 6 years now, since I retired in '82 from downhill racing, and I'm director of skiing at Whistler Mountain. As well as that, I run the summer ski camp, and Whistler is in a real growth phase, the resort itself, so I end up doing a lot of hosting and promoting of the resort in itself, mostly the winter aspect. I don't really get into too much summer promotion other than the summer skiing. Well, my first time up here, I guess I was about 13 years old, and my dad drove us up in the VW microbus with myself and 4 brothers. And it was a long, long trip from Vancouver, probably close to 3.5, 4 hours on a gravel road a lot of the way, back in 1965. And those were the days of skiing in Whistler. They had never even heard of a grooming machine up there then, and the snow would come down the valley. I remember we had to almost dig our way into the house with the snow we had back in those days. Since then, of course, the skiing on Whistler Mountain improved over the 15 years up to about 1975 or 1980. And then Blackcomb Mountain came on in 1980, and that was when the resort kind of consolidated as a international resort in itself, with the village here, Blackcomb Mountain on one side, Whistler Mountain on the other side. It became quite a unique situation where you could drive in and stay at the base of these 2 huge mountains without having to use your car and so on.
So I've seen all that happen, and some of it is fabulous, some of it isn't so fabulous, but I think generally in its totality, the place is a pretty neat place to visit now.
It's tough at home, though, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of pressure on him.
Oh, look at this. He's in second place.
All right, he's having a good run. He's had people pestering him all week, asking for autographs. It's taken its toll on him during the week, but he's having a good run.
It's a town that really has everything. There's good trails for mountain biking, and you know, there's windsurfing on the lake. There's mountains you can hike up. I'm an avid motorcycler. There's lots of trails around. It's just the perfect place. I love the mountains, and this is a perfect town.
What started off with great promise soon became a series of almost, and then culminated with the biggest win of all. That was the way Rob Boyd's World Cup downhill season went. After a third-place finish at Val Gardena, Italy, Boyd didn't finish in the top 3 again until the last race, on his hometown course in Whistler, BC, when he won it all.
It was a real sense of pride. Having done what I did for Whistler and for all my fans, and I think at that time it was a very much needed victory. You know, after a season that we had, things were looking really bad. Once again, the coaches were, you know, their jobs were almost on the line again, and then I seemed to pull through right in the crux, just when it's needed.
Boyd may be Canada's best downhiller and a world-class athlete, but here in Whistler, he's just one of the townsfolk. Rob knows everyone, and everyone knows Rob.
Skiing's the main thing in my life right now, but I'm part of this t-shirt shop, and sales are going quite well. It's really good to get into this kind of thing now and see the business side of life, you know, for life after skiing.
One of these days there's going to be another Rob Boyd coming along, and maybe from Whistler. That must make you feel pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, you know, do whatever I can to help them. If I'm a good role model, let it be that way.
I think you are. If you continue winning, you certainly are.
Still to come on Passport to Skiing, a private lunch with the executive chef at the Chateau Whistler, and a visit with a resident artist. That and more when we return. When construction of the Pacific Great Eastern Railway reached the valley in 1913, trapper Billy Bailiff wrote, "The first despoliation of the forest began."
Vancouver here to Whistler and on to Prince George is one of the most scenic train routes in the world. The train first came through Whistler in 1913, and for 50 years it was the only link with Vancouver because the road wasn't even constructed until 1965. Nowadays, the main business is freight, but there are still some passenger trains and even a ski train. It's a 2.5-hour ride to North Vancouver, and although not that many people take advantage of it, it seems to be a good alternative to the heavy weekend traffic.
I love the train as a way to get up here. I ski quite a lot in Europe, and almost anywhere you go by train rather than by car. The road in here is not nearly as good as the train. I think if they could make the train a little more frequent, so we'd get 3 or 4 of them a day rather than just the early morning and the night, and encourage people to take it, it would be a much better access than the road.
John Miller on the left was a trapper in the Whistler area. He was the one who talked Alex Phillip on the rights and his wife Myrtle into visiting the valley in 1910. For 50 cents, John would provide a traveler with a dinner of fresh vegetables and muskrats or bear stew. Bernard Casavan is the executive chef at the Chateau Whistler. He represents a new breed of chef for the 90s. He is as comfortable talking about computer programming as he is the type of soil in which the fresh herbs grow that he orders from the interior of British Columbia. His appointment as executive chef is a refreshing endorsement on what many people outside Canada already know. Canadians are as talented as anyone in the world when it comes to the culinary arts.
Here in Whistler, we feel that Whistler's new. It's on the rise. It's on the world market, and in conjunction with the hotel ambience, I think the food has to be different. These are sweet potato chips, we call them, which we take the sweet potatoes, peel them into potato starch, and then fried. So just a little bit different flavor.
They're delicious.
Follow-like flavor.
Now this is the venison, is it?
That's right. Fallow deer.
Wow.
And where does it? Abbotsford. It's out of Abbotsford Valley. And then the veal is also out of Pitt Meadows, the other end of the valley, just outside of Vancouver.
It looks, I mean, when you go to a really nice restaurant, that's the thing that always impresses me so much. Everything looks so nice.
Wow, these smokes. Low calorie, of course, Bernard. Oh,
there's
no fat in this at all. It's made 100% NutraSweet. one calorie, just for the taste of it.
Wow.
Look at this.
That is neat.
That's quite a plate, too. I mean,
Chunky's Choice.
Huh? This is Chunky's Choice? Or
Come over here. Look at that.
What's in the menu?
We actually grouted that out of the lobby floor. That's Vermont slate. We had to put a carpet over the missing space, so.
Did you see that, Lisa? Wow.
What we have here is an espresso custard. It's basically the same, cooked in the same technique as a creme caramel with a little bit of a twist. We have the chocolate cigar, as it's called. In here we have a mango coulis. It's had chocolate piped and then the coulis into it. Over here we have the raspberry coulis, fresh raspberries. We have what we call a wild berry compote, which is a stewing technique. Inside, I've seen that the pastry chef has put a little mocha custard again, mocha mousse, in a cornet, which is a tulip base. And here we have probably a pistachio and chocolate pate.
We have a very clean hotel, as you can see. In fact, we're going to eat off the kitchen floor right now.
Well, if you're planning on coming up to Whistler and you're going to stay at the CP Hotel, phone ahead because they are very busy, but it's worth every effort you have to make to stay here and to eat here as well.
Earlier this winter in Vancouver, a fundraising auction for the national ski team was held. One of the items up for bid was a day with Laurie and Todd while they worked on this episode of Passport to Skiing. Dale Muscovich was the highest bidder. His son Darren and his friend David Smith spent the day hanging out with our hosts.
So you guys, that was quite a day. It's getting pretty slushy down here.
Yeah.
What did you think of the whole production?
Oh, I thought it was great. Had a lot of fun. Pretty impressive. Some of the shots they take, like between the legs with the camera and stuff, is pretty impressive. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the magic of television, eh?
Yeah, I guess so.
You skied well. You followed us down all those pitches and all the bumps, and
Well,
each of you had a little bit of a tumble.
Yeah. We're on our skis the whole time, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Spent a couple times on our back sliding down the hill instead of on the skis, but
But thanks for spending the day with us.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thank
hope
you.
Hope you watch the show and
we will.
see yourselves.
Okay.
We had a great time, thanks.
Okay.
Now it's time for this week's edition of Parc du Mont-Saint-Anne Ski Lines. Today, we'll meet an interesting resident of Whistler, former graphic artist turned painter, Ken Westman.
For many years, I was here before the area really opened up
probably 20 years ago. And my concentration has always been on sports, and when winter rolls around, then of course it gravitates towards skiing because I ski a lot myself. Mind you, I haven't been skiing a lot for the past 10 years because all I've been doing is promoting my art and the ski scene, so consequently my skiing has been on the canvases. This year I've set up in Whistler. I have a studio now, and I'm right at the ski area, so hopefully I can get a lot more runs in. I can feel every movement and every turn and every angle of the sport, and that's another one of the reasons that I'll concentrate on skiing so much. When the racer's coming down to the gates and he's just digging the edges in, I can feel all that, and this is another one of the reasons for the concentration on skiing. I couldn't help myself. I had to come up here. I almost went down to the States. I was toying with the idea of going down there, but then when all this started to happen up here, it didn't take long to make up my mind where I was going to go, especially this being my home.
Coming up next on Passport to Skiing, another of Whistler's best restaurants and a beginner's attempts at paragliding. Shopping in Myrtle's day meant taking your pack to Mr. Rougier's Green Lake General Store.
With Whistler now playing host to an international ski clientele, it's understandable that the retailer has kept up with that trend. When I first came here, all you could find were t-shirt shops and souvenir shops. But with the increase of the wealthy tourist, now the stores offer everything from Canadiana artwork to fur coats to fashion and to the latest and most expensive ski wear. These days I find I'm doing a lot more window shopping than I used to.
In 1930, Myrtle Phillip ordered her first ski outfit from the Eaton's catalog. If you've never been here, the names can be a little confusing. Whistler Mountain is one of 2 ski resorts. It opened to the public in 1966. The town of Whistler was designated a resort municipality by the BC government in 1975. Town center with hotels and commercial space was planned. In 1976, it was a garbage dump, playing host to the local bear population. 5 years later, it was Whistler Village. Right beside Whistler Mountain is the other ski resort. It's called Blackcomb Mountain. It opened in 1980. It's an entirely different ski resort than Whistler Mountain, though you can access both resorts from ski lifts right at Whistler Village. Janet and Yoris Mouchard have introduced paragliding to Whistler. Through their company, Para West, they run one-day beginner courses almost every day of the week, winter and summer. Todd simply couldn't resist.
Yeah, okay, let's go.
Who goes first?
We've had probably about 400 people up here on Blackcomb paragliding with us now. And the average age is 31.5 years. We can only take people from 19 up just because of the waiver they're required to sign. But our oldest student was 72, so quite a wide age range.
Well, this is great. I mean, there's a lot going on all at once, quite obviously. And a lot of it is going on right in between my legs, which is a little different.
But then to get them up here and just do hands-on experience flight, pretty amazing because people are actually piloting an aircraft on their first day of flying, and it's quite exciting and very rewarding for us.
I've been out of ski racing for a couple of years, and ski racing had always been the most nerve-wracking thing I'd ever done. And so this is probably coming fairly close at this very moment.
Anytime, Todd.
Anytime.
Nice and dynamic.
I'm stuck in my hole.
I'm stuck in my hole, he says. That's it. Keep skiing forward. Let go of your front risers. Perfect. Take off. Now watch the reach on the paddles there. Stay on time. Nice work.
Oh.
And over to you, Bobo.
Yeah, that's good, Todd. Bit farther down, your hand. Okay, both hands up. That's a good job. Let's slowly turn to the left. Okay, put more, a bit more.
Voilà, that's good. All the way down.
Perfect landing.
Job.
What a job. He's been practicing, I'm sure.
Yeah, you were good. Very gentle all the time.
Sure, I think if you have a knowledge of the wind already, and I've had some experience flying, so you have the same kind of feeling.
Ah, yeah, helps a lot.
If you come to Whistler and ask around about the best places to eat, the one place you'll hear most often is Umberto's. There are 3 of them in town, and they're all run by Mario.
Well, sit down, Mario.
Yeah,
sure. This is terrific again, but I have to tell everyone that when the World Cup was here a few years ago, I was going to stay here for a week, and I was doing the commentary that week, and I phoned up Mario right away, and I said, I want 7 o'clock every night that I'm here. I came here, and I ate here every night, and it was terrific. And you fed me. I never ordered anything. Mario fed me something different every night, and everything was spectacular, just like tonight.
Thank you. Anytime you come in here, you know this is your house. Okay? Su casa, mi casa.
You might be sorry you said that.
It's okay, don't worry about it. You know, to cook is always fun. You have to eat every day, you know? It's nice to cook for friends. You know, to have a good company, talking about different things. You know, I like it. I really enjoy it, you know, yes. Okay, Todd, here we go. We want to do you a favor. We want to serve in this bottle of champagne like we used to do when you was winning the downhill races. And this is Napoleon started doing this. That was when they finished they finished the winning the big battles. They used to go back and to the headquarters, and they used to serve the champagne. So that's what I used to do.
Perfect.
Okay? And you can see the cut is just perfect. Taking me a couple, I think I second today. All right.
Yeah, we'll just show them the bottle here, Mario.
Well, you know, it's all clean. It's all clean.
A perfect cut on the top of the bottle. But you notice we're also not using cheap champagne either.
Why, not today,
Leave it to our good friends.
Nothing but the best.
Well, here we go. Nice to see you.
You've been a great
nice
host.
to have you here. Cheers.
Cheers. Wow. I actually have this from my very first time in 3rd place on the podium. We did this in Val d'Isere, and I still have this thing, and I cut my thumb on it. That was my memory of my whole first time on the podium.
Now it's time for this week's edition of Ski Canada Short Turns. Just before you reach the town of Whistler, you'll pass the Whistler Museum and Archives. Florence Petersen and Kathy McAllister are largely responsible for its development. It was also with their assistance that we've been able to provide you with glimpses into Whistler's history. The museum is only open on weekends, but if you're in Whistler, it's worth a little journey into the past. In 1913, Henry Horstman arrived from Kansas to stake mineral claims near Whistler. In the late summer of 1935, as 2 hikers passed his cabin, he looked up and said, "Gosh, all damn it, this hiking is getting to be quite a fad. You're the second party this year." For the final word on Whistler, it's past, present, and future. Who more appropriate than Myrtle Phillip? She died in 1986 at the age of 95. In the 75 years she lived here, there wasn't much she didn't see, including the development explosion of the 1980s. Her friend and neighbor for many years, Florence Petersen, explains Myrtle's outlook.
She thought it was just great, absolutely wonderful, that so many people could come and enjoy the valley. She hoped, and it is now developing for summertime activities, because that's how it started. And so she was very pleased. As I say, she was very progressive, very forward-looking, and didn't mind the change, rolled with it, really. accepted it as part of life and lived in a little cabin on the west side of Alta Lake and could come into the village and just loved it.